Before the arena anthems and platinum walls, before the legends were crowned, the 1970s belonged to the first albums, the ones that arrived unannounced on FM radio and changed everything. Some of these debuts launched dynasties, others burned out before their second act, but all of them deserve another spin on the turntable. Let's bring them back, starting with number 1. Number 10, Montrose, self-titled, 1973. This might be the most criminally overlooked debut in hard rock history. Guitarist Ronnie Montrose had paid his dues with Edgar Winter, but when he assembled his own power trio with a young unknown singer named Sammy Hagar, the result was pure California thunder. The opening track, Rock the Nation, hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in velvet, thick blues-soaked riffs that predated Van Halen by 5 years. Critics at the time noted the production felt raw, almost garage level, but that's exactly what gave it teeth. Nostalgic Warner Brothers didn't know what to do with it, and radio barely touched it, but guitar players everywhere were rewinding their cassettes trying to decode those licks. Sammy would go on to Van Halen fame, but this album remains the blueprint for American hard rock. Number 9, Boston, self-titled, 1976. Wait, you didn't forget this one, did you? Here's the twist. Most people think Boston exploded overnight, but the truth is stranger and more solitary. Tom Scholz recorded almost the entire album alone in his basement studio in Watertown, Massachusetts, using homemade equipment and an obsessive attention to sonic detail. When Epic Records finally released it, More Than a Feeling became inescapable, but the album went on to sell over 17 million copies, making it one of the best-selling debuts in rock history. Yet even now, people forget it was a debut. It sounds too polished, too complete, like the work of a veteran band. The pressure to replicate that perfection nearly destroyed Scholz, and the lawsuits that followed buried the band's legacy under years of legal battles. But that first album, still flawless. Number 8, Foreigner, self-titled, 1977. By the time Mick Jones and Ian MacDonald formed Foreigner, they were already rock veterans, Jones from Spooky Tooth, MacDonald from King Crimson. But their debut played like a masterclass in commercial hard rock, blending British muscle with American radio savvy. Feels Like the First Time and Cold as Ice both cracked the top 10, and the album went on to sell 5 million copies. What's often forgotten is how meticulously Jones crafted each song, layering guitars and vocals like a studio perfectionist years before Def Leppard made it standard practice. Atlantic Records reportedly spent over $50,000 just promoting the first single, a massive sum in '77. The album spent a year on the Billboard 200, but today it's overshadowed by their later hits. Go back and listen. It's tighter than you remember. Number 7, Bad Company, self-titled, 1974. Bad Company, I can't deny. When Free collapsed and Mott the Hoople fractured, 4 seasoned rockers formed a supergroup that refused to sound like one. Paul Rodgers brought that soulful howl, Mick Ralphs delivered the riffs, and together they created one of the most effortlessly cool debuts of the decade. Can't Get Enough climbed to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the album hit number 1, staying on the charts for over 90 weeks. What made it special wasn't just the pedigree, it was the space between the notes, the way they let songs breathe instead of overplaying. Swan Song Records, Led Zeppelin's label, gave them total creative freedom, and you can hear it in every laid-back groove. By most accounts, they recorded the whole thing in under 3 weeks. It's the sound of masters doing what they were born to do, and somehow we let it slip into the background noise of classic rock radio. If you're loving this trip through forgotten records, hit subscribe. We've got more stories from rock's golden age coming every week. Number 6, The Cars, self-titled, 1978. How does a debut album produce 3 top 40 hits and still feel like a cult secret? Rick Ocasek and Benjamin Orr had been grinding through Boston clubs for years, refining a sound that married new wave keyboards with guitar rock punch. When Elektra Records finally signed them, producer Roy Thomas Baker, fresh off Queen's multi-tracked epics, stripped everything down to robotic precision and icy hooks. My Needed, My Best Friend's Girl, and Good Times Roll all became MTV staples years before MTV even existed. The album went 6 times platinum, but because the Cars kept evolving, people forget how fully formed they were right out of the gate. Listen now and you'll hear the DNA of every 80s rock band that followed, from The Killers back to Duran Duran. Ocasek passed in 2019, and suddenly the world remembered what had always been there. Number 5, Dire Straits, self-titled, 1978. Mark Knopfler's voice sounded like gravel and cigarettes, and his guitar playing was a finger-picking revelation in an era drowning in distortion. The album took over a year to gain traction, but once Sultans of Swing caught fire, it became one of the most enduring rock songs of the decade. What's remarkable is how un-1970s it sounded. No synthesizers, no bombast, just four guys playing in a room like it was 1958. Warner Brothers initially had no idea how to market it, and reportedly the band was playing pubs for £20 a night when the album finally broke in America. It peaked at number 2 in the UK and eventually sold millions worldwide, but it's often overshadowed by Brothers in Arms and the MTV videos that followed. Go back to this debut, and you'll hear why rock didn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needed to be honest. Number 4, Cheap Trick, self-titled, 1977. They looked like a collision between the Beatles and a horror movie, and they sounded even stranger. Rick Nielsen's manic guitar assault, Robin Zander's pretty boy vocals, and the rhythm section's punk metal backbone created something that defied categorization. Epic Records didn't know what to do with them. The debut barely cracked the Billboard 200 in America, but in Japan they were gods, and it was their live album from Tokyo 2 years later that finally broke them stateside. Still, this first record contains some of their best songwriting. He's a Whore, Oh Candy, and ELO Kitties showcased a band that could be heavy, poppy, and sarcastic all at once. Critics loved them, but radio hesitated. By the time Surrender and I Want You to Want Me became hits, most fans had forgotten where it all started. This debut is proof that sometimes the best albums take years to be understood. Number 3, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, self-titled, 1976. Tom Petty grew up in Gainesville, Florida, watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and dreaming of escape. When Shelter Records signed the Heartbreakers, they had the songs but not the budget. The album was recorded quickly and released with little fanfare. Breakdown didn't chart the first time around. It wasn't until a year later, after Petty fought the label and college radio kept spinning it, that the song finally cracked the top 40. The album itself took over a year to go gold, and by then critics were already calling them derivative of the Byrds. But listen to American Girl or anything that's rock and roll and tell me that's not pure adrenaline and heartland poetry. Petty spent the next 40 years proving he belonged in the pantheon, but this debut was the map he followed all along. It's easy to forget how fragile success was back then. One wrong radio station and it all disappears. Number 2, Van Halen, self-titled, 1978. You didn't forget this one, but you forgot what it felt like when it landed. Eddie Van Halen reinvented the electric guitar on Eruption, a 1-minute 42-second solo that sounded like a UFO crashing into a Marshall stack. David Lee Roth brought the showmanship, Michael Anthony the harmonies, and Alex Van Halen the thunder. Warner Brothers spent less than $40,000 recording it, and Ted Templeman produced it in a matter of weeks. Their cover of the Kinks' You Really Got Me hit number 36, but it was the deep cuts, Runnin' with the Devil, Ain't Talkin' About Love, Jamie's Cryin', that rewired rock radio. The album went diamond, but Eddie struggled with the fame, retreating into addiction and perfectionism. Every guitar player since has tried to copy him, but no one's ever matched the raw joy of this debut. It's not forgotten, but we've stopped hearing it with fresh ears, and that's the tragedy. Number 1, Pretenders, self-titled, 1979. Chrissie Hynde was an American who had to move to London to become a rock star, and even then, the road was brutal. She wrote for the NME, worked in Malcolm McLaren's shop, and watched punk explode around her before finally forming her own band. The debut, released in late '79, bridged punk aggression and new wave melody in a way no one else had managed. Brass in Pocket became a number 1 hit in the UK and climbed to number 14 in the US, but the album had so much more: Kid, Mystery Achievement, Stop Your Sobbing, Darren's Melvin. Real Records and Sire took a chance on a female-fronted rock band at a time when that was still considered a novelty. Tragedy would follow. Guitarist James Honeyman Scott and bassist Pete Farndon both died within a year of each other in the early 80s. But this debut stands as one of the most complete, confident, and uncompromising rock albums of the decade. It's overshadowed by Back on the Chain Gang and the MTV era, but if you want to understand the late 70s in one record, start here. These 10 albums arrived in a decade when rock was still dangerous, still unpredictable, still capable of changing lives with 12 tracks and 38 minutes of vinyl. Some of these bands went on to superstardom, others flamed out or faded, but every single one of them earned their place in history with a debut that dared to be different. The 1970s gave us too much music to remember it all, but these records deserve to be pulled from the back of the crate and played loud one more time. Because in the end, the best debuts don't announce themselves. They sneak into your life and never leave. Which song hit you hardest today? Drop your memories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the decades that changed music forever.